Hi everyone, welcome back to the Beadaholique Design Studio, and we are here to talk all about strung jewelry. So I'm Kat Sylvia, and I'm joined today by Julie Bean, and we do these wonderful live classes the first Friday of every month, so you've probably joined us before, so welcome back. And if you're brand new, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about strung jewelry. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the basics, but then kind of taking it beyond the basics. So if you've worked with stringing jewelry before, we have lots of examples here to show you and lots of little different techniques and tips and tricks for you.
Yeah, so this is really a great class, especially if you're a beginner. But even if you're not a beginner, we are going to go beyond the basics. But if you are new to jewelry making or you've been interested in it before, stringing is really a fun way to get started.
You know, I think it's a lot of people's first foray into jewelry making is stringing.
I think so too, and then we all come back to it.
Yep.
It never goes away. So it's not like you try stringing and then you go on to something else. You're always continuing to string. I know some of my favorite projects are strung projects to this day.
Yeah, and well, you know, what I kind of like about it is sometimes you don't think of them as stringing projects when it's a little bit more complicated. So I think that's what we're gonna talk a little bit about that today. But of course, everything that you see here, you can get at beadaholique.com. So we sell all the supplies and all the tools. So if you're curious about a plier that we're using or a bead that we're using, you can get all of that at beadaholique.com.
Yeah. So I want to look at our table first.
Yes, let's take a look at everything.
We have fun putting these tables together. So Kat and I, a little behind the scenes, Kat and I yesterday, so always the day before the class, we get together and we almost have like a little jewelry party.
We do.
Where we're like shopping in our like drawers where we've had old projects and we're getting stuff off our desk to show you things that we think might inspire you, things that inspire us. So let's take a look at the table.
Sure. All right, so let's start over here actually, and you're going to see, I'm going to create a version of this project here, so stay tuned for that. But this is a nice way to do braiding with strung jewelry. And then we have another example here. We've got some fiber happening there at the bottom. We're going to show you guys about incorporating chain into your strung jewelry. And then of course, you know, if you guys have questions about sizing or anything like that, we're going to go over that. We're going to talk about crimp tubes, crimp beads. We have lots of really great examples to kind of show you here. We're going to talk about strand reducers as well. We have some beautiful examples up here, and Julie's going to talk about that in a little bit. Yeah. We also have, let's see, what do we got here? Oh, I was like, what does he see in there?
Yeah, so over on my side of the table here, we have some Strand Spacers, and well, this is kind of an unusual one. It's a carrier bead, so you can use a 2-hole bead as a Strand Spacer, or a 3-hole bead for that matter. Yeah. And then we've got some variety packs, which are really nice, especially if you're not sure which size crimp bead you want. I have a really traditional strung necklace right here. It's a single strand, but you can see I added some glitz to it with these little rondelle spacers. Over here I have a gemstone strung necklace, and there's a little tip I'm going to talk to you about how to do a toggle clasp on a strung necklace. And then over here I have a couple strung necklaces. We actually did this during one of our beading breaks. And what's interesting about these is they do not have a clasp. So we've actually hidden a little crimp bead there, and we've made it one continuous necklace that slides over your head. So right now though, before we go any further, I have something I want to ask everyone. So I am going to be making a bracelet. And I have these 3 bracelets right here. Now these are all using Swarovski pearls, and actually all 3 of them use the exact same ingredients. Of course, color difference on the pearls. But it is fun to see how you can take the same ingredients, which are what I have in front of me right here, and you can make different designs just based upon how you string and how you basically weave your beading wire in and out. So I'm going to call this one the A bracelet. This is the scalloped one. I'll show you what that looks like on the wrist. And we just have these great magnetic clasps. So we've got a scalloped one. We have this one here, which we're going to say is the B option. And that's 2 strands continuous for basically the entire length of the bracelet. And then this one here we'll call C, which has a focal, which is wider, and then it tapers to a little bit narrower, and then is finished off with that same magnetic clasp. So I would love to hear in the next maybe 3-5 minutes what you guys think. So A is a scalloped, B is a continual 2-strand, and C is got this focal that tapers at the end. So A, B, C. Just let us know in the comments section, and then Brian, who is checking comments and looking for questions, is going to let us know what the overall consensus is, and then I will build that style here.
I love it.
So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys because it was fun. It was really fun actually to take just one set of ingredients and then be like, well, how many different ways can I work this? And I had to stop after 3 for time because I was spending a lot of time on this. But I
have all the bracelets.
but I was having so much fun. So that's good to keep in mind too, especially if you maybe get some supplies that have extras, because what you can actually do in this case is 2 of the bracelets, the purple ones, you can make both of those bracelets with just 1 lot of everything. You just need a second lot of these little spacer beads. But you have enough crimp bead covers, pearls, you get 2 clasps, you get enough strand spacers. So that's kind of fun too.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's great when you're, thinking ahead to the holidays or any gift giving, or if you're going to be selling your jewelry,
Absolutely.
You can take the same ingredients and then make 2 very different bracelets, because someone might go, oh, I like this one, and then someone say, I like this one, but it's the same, it's the same but different. So that's kind of a great thing, a great little tip, if you're planning on selling some jewelry as well.
Yeah, and it lets you stretch out your supplies, which
Exactly.
we all love to do.
I was like, I'm always looking to do.
I know, me too. I'm like, how can I use this in a bunch of different ways?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let us know your votes, and then we are going to get a consensus, and then I'll build it. But if you've watched us before, you do know that we always have a giveaway on these monthly live classes because we want to share the love of beading with you guys. So Kat, what do we have for our giveaway?
All right, so we have some great stuff today. All right, so to kind of get you guys into stringing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you a couple of tools here. So we're gonna be using the Xuron 4-in-1 crimping pliers, and they actually have a chain nose plier in them as well. This is one of our favorite tools when it comes to stringing. So we're gonna give you guys this tool. We're also gonna give you guys some great beading wire here. And we're going to give you a nice variety pack of 2x2 crimp tubes. Now this is a great thing, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but when you kind of find that standard size that you like to use and you want it some different colors, you can go ahead and use that there as well. And then we also have some bead stoppers that we're going to be giving you. And of course we have to give you some amazing beads, so we're giving you this great bead mix from John Bead, and this is really, really fun. It's all kinds of different check glass beads, so we're giving this as well.
And your hands are full.
I was liking it so much.
All right.
And then we also have this great bead board. Now this actually has a plastic cover on it because it's meant for travel as well. But what you're going to do with this is you can you see that there's some grooves here, and you can actually see it better in the photo there, where you can actually line up your beads and get all your beading cord ready so you can really plan the style that you want to do, and this is great for stringing. So this is a bead board from the Beadsmith.
Yeah, so that is super fun. Now, when I get going on my bracelet, you'll see how to use those exact crimping pliers and the bead stoppers. So we'll show you how to use those tools for sure. But the way you enter to win this giveaway, if you haven't done one of these with us before, is you leave a comment, and it can be anything. It could be, hi, good morning,
a vote for the bracelet.
A vote for the bracelet, what your favorite type of jewelry making project is, what your current project is. It can be anything, a question. And that qualifies you to enter our giveaway. And we will announce the winner live at the end of this broadcast.
Yeah.
So good luck.
All right, so one last look at the giveaway there, and then we're going to start diving into making things. So welcome to everyone who's just joining us. We are talking all about strung jewelry today. We're going to be doing some basics and then beyond the basics. So this will really help sort of elevate your strung jewelry. So I think we're just about ready to dive in. We're just going to choose the bracelet that you guys have voted on the most for Julie to create.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right, so what's the consensus?
It's really close between A and C, but C.
C.
C,
Okay, so,
all right.
and let's make sure I did this right. You'll double check me. We did A, B, and C.
Yes, we did.
And it sounds like everyone wants to know how to do C.
Fantastic.
Great. So I'm going to be first reviewing my supplies here. So just so you get a good overview of everything I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to put this guy here so I have a little template, which is always nice to be able to have a little pattern to follow. So first off, I'm going to be using Beadaholique beading wire. So if you're doing a strung project, traditionally you're going to be using beading wire. And that's what we're going to be covering in this class. Now you can use other materials too. I think a lot of people would consider a stretch bracelet, a strung bracelet, and some different materials. But a really good sturdy foundation is important. And for everything you see on our table here, we are using beading wire. Now I'm going to be using a 19 strand beading wire. It says it right there, and it's 0.015, and that is a nice good medium beading wire. I'd say most of the time Kat and I are going to use something around the 19 strand 0.015.
Yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate.
And Kat, do you really quickly want to talk about
Sure.
the different strands and what that means? Because that's a really common question that we get.
Yeah, I was going to say, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of lay these out in front of you here. So what you can see here is if you look really closely, you can see that there's a little illustration on each of these. And when we say that it's 7 strand, 49 strand, 19 strand, what that means is that is the number of steel cables that are inside there. So it's actually, you know, if you were to look at a really big wire, you'd see that. But of course, this is tiny beading wire. But it's all these little cables, and then they're wrapped in a nylon coating. Now, oftentimes you'll see that it'll say the word clear. All that means is that that nylon coating is clear. So for example, with this gold one, the nylon coating is gold. So that's sort of the difference there. So when you're looking at the color, you're looking at the color of the coating, not the color of the wire underneath. Now, you won't really see that, but there you go.
Yeah.
So just to give you guys a little extra tip, if you're trying to choose the right beading wire, the higher the number of strands, the more string-like it's going to be, so the more flexible it's going to be. The lower number of strands, the stiffer it's going to be, and it's going to be a little bit more prone to kinking, but this, you know, the 7 strand, especially in a 0.018, this is going to be really great for using with something like gemstones, you know, because you can actually have that weight, and you probably want it to have a really good shape and a nice stiffness to it. So that sort of kind of can help guide you, but also that's also why if you're just getting into it, sometimes we recommend the 19 strand. It's a good sort of middle ground to start with. And then the other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I just want to show you guys now that we have a close-up on these, you can see here that Beadalon actually tells you the number of crimp bead and crimp tube that you're going to need.
That printing might be a little clear.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yeah. So it has a number 1 and a number 2. And if we look here on the package that Beadalon has, it actually tells you the numbers. So it's a number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So we're going to talk about this again a little bit further, but this is a nice little multi-pack so that you can match the tube to the wire. Now, of course, there are always exceptions because once you start to do multiple strands through the crimp tube, you tend to have to adjust, but that's why we love these multiple packs there.
Yeah, and you can always go onto the Beadaholique.com website and you can check. We're going to have that information in the product listing. So you can always see, there's a little option to do click see more.
Yep.
And that will help to tell you all of that because we do try to list that for you. And then if you are just getting started, this is a tip that Kat always recommends. Look at our projects.
Yeah.
Look and see what we did. So if you are having, say, something that's got 3 strands coming to one, and you want to know, well, what size crimp bead do I use, or crimp tube, or crimp tube cover? Check a previous project. We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of projects. Just check the listings and that will give you a good guide.
Yeah, and you can actually filter our projects by stringing. So if you're really just looking for stringing and you just kind of want to know what cord we used, what crimp, cover, size, all that stuff, and then you can choose your beads and have fun from there. But that, you know, we really do that to give you guys that guide. So please utilize that at beadaholique.com.
Yeah. All right, so that was a really long intro just to talk about the beading wire we're going to use, but it's really such a basic component to your Strung projects. We wanted to go over that.
Well,
and
we get asked that a lot as well, so we wanted to kind of debunk that for you guys.
We do, for sure. And I think as we're creating our projects, we are going to stop and pause and talk about some of the materials and hopefully give you some more information about that. All right, so we've got our beading wire.
All right, now we have our beading wire.
Now, if I was just doing a single strand necklace or bracelet, I would probably use a 2mm by 2mm crimp tube. I personally love crimp tubes. I'm not as big of a fan of crimp beads. I find them harder to use.
I would agree with that.
So yeah, that's just a
biased
personal preference.
Yeah.
You'll notice that we use a lot of crimp tubes as opposed to crimp beads. I just find them easier. But this bracelet actually does something a little different where it's got 2 strands of the beading wire that need to go into a single crimp bead, which means when you loop it around the clasp loop, you're going to have 4 strands going through a single crimp tube. So I'm going to actually use a larger size. This is going to be a 2.5 by 2.5 millimeter. So I'm going to go up in size, which also means I'm going to go up in size for my crimp bead cover, and I'm going to be using a 5mm crimp bead cover. So those are some of my really basic supplies. Now for all the fun stuff that you're really going to get to see in the design, I am using this Swarovski Crystal Tahitian Look Pearl. So this is a new pearl, and the color is so pretty.
It's beautiful.
I love it. It's just such a gorgeous color. And we found it looks really great with silver and gold. I've chosen to pair it with gold, and I've got 4mm, 6mm, and 8mm. And I've got these little tiara cast spacer beads I'm going to be using between it. I'm going to be using a little magnetic clasp because
we love our magnetic
we
clasps.
do. They're so easy for bracelets. And then really something that's going to make this stay together. So if you notice the center point, there's a little bit of give right here, but overall the strands are staying nice and together. You'll see that especially here too on the one that was a full 2-strand. I'm using spacer bars. And they come in different sizes, and this here spacer bar is to space 6mm beads, and this one here is to space 8mm beads. And you'll see that at Beadaholique.com. We list that in the description, so it takes the guesswork out of it. You don't have to think, well, what size bead is going to go with that? So those are my basic supplies, and for my tools, I'm going to be using a cutter. This is a Tronix one. I am going to be using the Xuron 4-in-1 because I am using the bigger crimp tube. I want to have the bigger notch for this one. And then a little pair of Wubber's chain nose. So those are my basic supplies.
Great. Very, very basic supplies. Nothing too crazy.
I know. I kept thinking, did I forget something?
We both had that thought. We were like, no, this is too simple.
Yes. So we might have an interesting moment later on.
I was like, I don't know, maybe we did forget something.
All right. Beading wire. We're going to cut it. So I want 2 lengths that are about 15 inches long. And always cut it with a pair of cutters, not scissors. Because remember, it is a steel wire. So there's 1.
Now, you're not making a 15-inch bracelet.
I am not making a 15-inch bracelet. What I am doing is I am allowing enough wire on either side to loop through that clasp and back down through that crimp bead and give me some wiggle room to work with. So you always cut more. I say you want to have at least 3 inches, if not 4 inches on either side.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you are cutting, let's say you want to make a 18-inch necklace. So then you would want to give yourself at least 24 inches of wire.
I would say so, yeah. And then we actually have a little example we're going to show you guys later in what to do with some of those leftover pieces of wire.
Oh yes, never toss your scraps.
Never toss the scraps.
All right, so now we're going to take our 2 ends and we're going to line them up. And we're going to put a bead stopper on them. So this does exactly what it sounds like. It stops your beads from falling off. It's a little like accordion. And I'm going to put it a couple inches, maybe like 3 inches from my end. And for my case, I actually want the cords together because I'm going to start my pattern by stringing both of these through the beads. So I'm going to begin with, sometimes I add the crimp bead at the end. I don't know why.
I generally add my crimp bead at the end. I mean, it's, you know you're going to need it, so you could always add it here.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess I'll try adding it here. It's funny. Does anyone else do that? It's a very weird, I don't know. I just always will string my entire design and then I'll add the crimp bead at the end. All right, let's scoot some of these guys out. Didn't make a very big hole. And I'm scooting out more than what obviously is the 2 needed for the crimping because I actually use these as just regular beads in the design.
That's a good little tip because they're just little gold tube beads.
Same thing with the crimp bead covers. You can close them and just use them as a gold bead.
Yeah.
All right, so here, why not? We'll string the crimp tube and we're going to string it through both of our wires. Okay, and then, you know what? Let me see, because I noticed I made a boo-boo on this bracelet.
What did you do?
Look. So I put a little gold spacer bead there, but I didn't put it there. So I'm going to choose not to use a spacer bead.
Okay, starting right with the pearl.
Yep, starting right with the pearl.
All right, we do have a question while you're just getting started there.
Kelly Carter asks, is there a reason you don't start with the clasp?
Oh, actually, yes. Okay, so we have a question from Kelly. Hi, Kelly. So she has a question as to why you didn't start with the clasp. And we have a good answer for that one because we were talking about this earlier today.
We were talking about this. If you make a mistake if you secure it to the clasp, what Kelly is meaning is to start by, I believe what she's meaning, is to start by crimping it right to the clasp.
Yeah, so you eliminate the need for a bead stopper.
Exactly, which you can definitely do. I don't do it because if I make a mistake, like I have made a mistake here and did not catch, you can go ahead and fix it by just taking off the bead stopper and not having to cut your clasp off or undo your entire design, especially if you're doing like a long necklace. It would be kind of a shame to get 24, 28 inches in of the stringing and then realize you made a mistake towards the beginning and have to like unstring everything or cut off your clasp and waste beading wire. So I always start with a bead stopper just to kind of a little safeguard.
Well, I think also because, you know, when I'm designing, sometimes I'm not entirely sure what I want it to look like. It starts to take a new shape. And I'm like, oh, you know, I want to go back to the beginning and add more gold beads, or, you know, in one of the examples that Julie has here, and it's this scalloped one, you can see that this design is actually a little bit bigger, but let's say it was a little bit smaller than the other ones. And I found out that I just wanted to add a couple more pearls on either side just to give it a little 1/4 of an inch, you know, or a little 1/2 inch, but I didn't want to add a whole unit there, which is, you know, I'm going to eyeball it, maybe say about 2 inches, you know, so you can always kind of do that as well. But if you've already added the clasp on one side, you know, you're kind of out of luck because now you got to cut it off and try to redo it again.
Yeah.
So that's sort of why we generally don't. You absolutely can. It's not wrong to do it that way, especially if you're very secure in your design.
Oh, yeah.
I think sometimes for me, I just like to keep that a little open-ended in case I want to go back and add another pearl or something once I've gotten to actually see how long it's going to be.
All right,
so that is definitely something that we do.
And great question though, because it does seem like,
question,
why don't you? And you can, like you said, you can if you want to.
It's not wrong to do it that way.
All right, so if you notice what I've been doing so far is I've been building up my design and I've just been putting both strands of beading wire through the holes of the beads. So they are, you know, they're together at this point. And I'm almost ready to start to separate them out.
Well, and it's nice to see that both strands of beading wire are fitting through that 4mm.
Yes, they do. I will give you one little tip. If sometimes with the coating on the pearls, it is a little bit, there's like usually a smaller hole and a larger hole. It's the same size, but just because of the coating, one side has a little bit larger hole and one side has a little bit smaller. What you can do is, well, I always recommend going through the largest hole with your beading wire first.
Absolutely.
And then if you need to, you could just take like a head pin or a sewing needle or whatever and just poke through it. It's never enclosed. It's just not, I don't think they really thought that a person would be putting 2 strands of beading wire through it.
I was going to say, it's a tight fit, but it does fit if you just sort of find the right side to go in through.
All right, so we are almost ready to separate out. Got one more of these pretty little spacer beads. Okay, so now this is what I've got so far. So we've started here with this single strand and now we're gonna break it apart. And so I'm just gonna separate out my strands and start to string them simultaneously with the same pattern. And because I wanted to do a nice tighter taper, I used my Crimp Tubes as a bead.
Well, that was smart.
Yeah, because I tried the pearls and the pearls just were too wide. It didn't taper properly. So I'm just gonna do this and then add another pearl to each, and I'm just doing it kind of back and forth one at a time.
And I love the little metal embellishment. It really does kind of take it to the next level. You know, we did a whole great class all about bead caps and cones and, you know, kind of doing a side-by-side. And actually, I have that project I'll show you guys later. But it's just nice to kind of see just that little extra metal embellishment that goes in there to elevate the design. So that's sort of, again, just kind of taking it beyond the basics. But I love this one strand to separating into 2 strands. It's very cool.
Yeah, I kind of want to see, like, how could I even, you know, do these differently? Like, could I do a 3-strand? I mean, I don't think I could get through the pearls, but I could do a different, you know, a different bead. All right, so here I'm ready to start using a spacer bar. So for the spacer bar, that's what this little tiny, tiny thin bar is. And it basically does what it sounds. It spaces them out at even intervals, and it keeps the actual design kind of tight and together so your beads don't go all over the place. Okay. So just like that, we've got a spacer bar on there. And they're very discreet. Kat actually has another necklace example here that we can see in a little bit that uses these spacer bars too. And there's something that I always forget exists.
What?
Like the spacer bars.
Oh,
I forget. I forget that they're an option, and then I'll be reminded for some reason. I'll be like, oh yeah, those are really handy.
Well, and I do like how thin they are. Well, we do also have some, you know, we were talking about the carrier beads, but we also have these guys. I'm just going to kind of bring these up so that people don't have to go too far. But these are actually kind of cool because you can get little beads that sit inside of there, but these are sort of the big daddy spacer beads. But, you know, again, adding a little bit more metal to that. But yeah, there's another little example there.
Absolutely.
So.
All right, so I'm ready to now add a new size of bead. So if you are doing a tapering effect, and we can actually show this necklace too, kind of the core theory behind tapering is you start small and then you get gradually bigger. So you look for incremental increases. You don't want to increase all at once. And so for this here, I started, on this taper, I started with the smaller crimp tubes. I went up to a 4mm bead, and now I'm going to go up to a 6mm bead. And once I've got my 6mm bead, I'm ready for another spacer bar. Now I'm actually going to use the 8mm spacer bar, even though I just strung 6mm beads. So you can do that too. The description of what they're supposed to be, like 6mm, 8mm, is a recommendation, and it means what will guaranteed fit that, but you can always go bigger. You can go ahead and take a 6mm bead and put it on an 8mm spacer bar if you want a little bit wider gap. Okay.
Yeah, and we do have another question.
Yeah, whenever YouTube viewers, they're asking if, do you need to use a needle for some of the softer wire?
Okay, so the question is, do you need to use a needle for some of the softer wire? I haven't found the need for a needle on some of this wire. I actually think it would be very, gone. I think it would be difficult to thread a needle onto a lot of the beading wire, especially, I mean, even if it is really thin. You know what? I don't think that you really need to do that. Now, if you have a thicker wire and you're having trouble getting your beads on, what I always recommend is taking your flesh cutters and cutting at an angle so that you're actually making a little point. That can sometimes help if you're having trouble stringing on your beads. But yeah, I mean, Julia, do you have any thoughts about that? I don't think I would use a needle with a lot of the beading wire. I think it's stiff enough, even the thinnest ones.
I agree. I don't think you really need a needle. If you can kind of see on my finger, this is a pretty stiff point.
Yeah.
It's going to go through your beads very nice and very easily. And I feel like a needle, I don't know how you put a needle on it. If you put a needle on it, you would have to almost, you put it through the eye of the needle and it doubles it. And that's going to create a kink, and it's also going to be a lot thicker to go through your beads.
Well, I was going to say, one of my concerns for that would be that if you are using a really thin wire, I have to assume that you've chosen small beads. And because of that, you wouldn't want to then double up the wire because you've chosen a thinner wire for that reason. So that would sort of just be my thought about that. So no, I don't think you need to, especially if you are using small tiny beads. Now, if you're trying to pick up larger beads and your wire is too thin, and you're having trouble doing that, your wire might be too thin to sort of sustain those beads. So consider that as well.
And that's a really good tip, is as you're trying to choose what supplies you need for your project, and you're thinking, well, what beading wire do I need? What crimp tube do I need? First and foremost, think about what your design is, and think about what weight are your beads. If you have heavier beads, you're going to want a larger diameter beading wire. Think about how long your necklace is going to be. Think about all these different factors about your finished design, and then you can kind of work backwards. Yeah. And I would say choose your beading wire first, and then choose your crimp tube to match.
Absolutely, yeah. You wouldn't kind of go the other way, because the crimps are, significantly less expensive than beading wire. So, and also that's where I recommend trying to have like a multi-pack of the crimp tubes, because sometimes you'll be working with the same wire, but if you're going to double it up, you need a larger crimp tube, but that way you don't have to buy a whole new thing of crimp tubes. You buy the multi-pack and then you're set and you're good to go.
Well, and they stretch, like, how many are in here? 250 of the 1.5 by 1.5, 150 of the 2x2, and 75 of the 2.5 by 2.5. So that's gonna last a really
I was like,
long
so you're
time.
good at that, yeah. But you can also get a pack of gold and a pack of silver, and that way you're covered, you know. And one thing that I'll always do is sometimes I'll have like a little scrap of what I know is the beading wire that I have at home, and I'll just quickly, before I string any beads, I'll quick do a loop, do a crimp. Okay, that's holding, you know, try to stress it a little bit, make sure that it's really good, and then you know that that's gonna work. So you can always kind of sacrifice a crimp tube when you're just starting.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
just to kind of test.
And if you have not crimped crimp tubes before, it does take a little bit of practice.
Yeah.
So
it took me a little while to learn how to really do it so that it's nice and clean.
Yeah. So allow yourself that time and just say, okay, well, I'm going to take these 10 crimp beads, crimp tubes, and I'm just going to practice. And you just cut yourself a little bit of beading wire and you just practice crimping.
Yeah.
And that's better than starting on your project for the first time and just trying to crimp it
Yeah.
after you've done all your stringing. So just do a little bit of practice to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good tip. You know, we all learned. You know, we all started
Absolutely.
somewhere, so no shame in that at all.
All right, so I am over halfway done with this bracelet.
All right. Well, you know what? While you're doing that, I'm going to show the other example here that I have, because you've kind of gotten halfway there. So this is actually a little choker I did, and I used those same spacer beads as well, so you can just kind of see them in there. Now, you know, you're not going to see any other gold in there, but just those little spacer beads, and it actually creates a nice little tapered collar effect there. And I have them going every couple of beads here, every 3rd or 4th bead. And what's nice is I actually used it at the very end because my clasp is a double strand clasp. So I used it to sort of give a little bit of structure there at the end. So then I did my crimps and my crimp covers, but you can just kind of see how that can help hold together a nice clasp at the back, just like so. So if you guys are curious about this, this is the Emily choker.
That's so pretty.
Yeah, oh, thank you. I did this for a little bridal season, so I want to do that kind of dusty rose, that dusty pink. But you can also, you know, this is again just a great example of using those spacer beads. But when you kind of look at it from far away, and I'll kind of put it back up here on the bust, you don't quite notice those spacer beads, which is nice. They're kind of hidden in there. You kind of only notice once you get really close up, which is really nice. So it just looks like there's just a nice structure to it, and that way, you know, I like using these spacer beads and creating one single unit, one single necklace, because that way then you don't have all these different layers falling in and, you know, falling over each other. So you have that nice, and it's going to be nice and stable. So I'm actually going to show you again in a minute here to do that braiding technique so you get that beautiful focal, but you don't have all this multi-strand business happening, which is a good design as well. I'm just saying, you know, for something a little bit different, you know, you can braid them together to create like a really nice chunky look.
And I think that look too is something you see a lot in boutiques, and you kind of wonder, like, how did they do that so it looks neat and tidy? Because sometimes when you do it yourself, it doesn't look
It
so
doesn't
neat
look
and
as neat and tidy, yeah.
So I think that's
There's something that happens there.
yeah, something I'm a little off. So it'll be really fun to see you do that.
Yeah.
All right, I've done my focal, and now
right.
I am ready to bring it back down to where we've just got the single strand. So you see that my 2 strands are still separate at this point, and I beaded that whole focal. And I've got my little crimp tubes right there, and now I'm just literally bringing my strands back together and going to feed them again through the single bead. So we're just going to start again, and we're going to repeat. So you'll often see in our instructions we say repeat your pattern or a mirror image from the halfway point, and that's just what we mean. It means you're just making sure that each side from the center point is identical.
But that's also why another good tip that Kelly brought up is to have the front or the start and the end of the bracelet be the same. So if you've gotten all the way to the end and you realize that it's too long, you can, you know, get rid of a bead or add another bead. So
right, and evenly get rid of it on both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're getting there. And one thing I'm doing as I'm doing is I'm just kind of adjusting. I'm making sure I don't have any big gaps in my beading wire and nothing is kinked. Because sometimes if you are doing this, especially if you do a design like the scallop here, where you are kind of doing this like weaving in and out,
Yeah.
you might have a little gap that you just need to kind of literally just wiggle.
Well, and you know, we're going to talk about this kind of as you get a little bit closer to the clasp of making sure that it's not too tight, but everything that is, you know, good and snug, you know, because we'll always say pull snug, you know, because we don't want it to be loosey-goosey, but you also don't want it to be too tight so that your bracelet won't actually bend around your wrist. I made that mistake when I first started doing this. I was like, oh, great, my strung bracelet that now is just a stick because it won't bend.
And I do have an example if you'd like to show, because I am fine to admit my errors. It's not that stiff, but this one here is a little stiffer than I would like because I did that. I did not leave enough wiggle room, and if you look at my beads,
Oh, yep, they kind
of are a little
they kink a bit.
stiff, and that was just because I did not leave enough room.
Enough bending room.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that here.
I was going to say,
So we all do it, and I think we're
Yeah.
all excited when we're at the end of our project, and it's the finishing touch, and it's like, oh no.
well, and I know that's often a difficult thing to get right when you're doing a multiple strand bracelet like this. Now this is a strand reducer here at the end, and it's difficult to do because you know that you've counted your beads, but you know what? You don't account for like the tiniest little fraction of a millimeter that might be off about one of the strands. So you just kind of have to give it just that little extra love and just give it a little bit of breathing room, and that can be kind of tough. So.
Yeah, I have one bracelet I distinctly remember. I don't know what beads I used. It must have been like odd shaped beads or something. I actually had to crimp the second half of the crimp, like the second half of the bracelet crimp, as it was in a curved position.
Oh, interesting.
Because every time I laid it straight, I had to redo it a couple times. I could not leave the right amount of space. They were either really large beads and they were bumping each other. Something was happening. I actually had to crimp it curved.
Oh, well.
So I was like, okay.
You're like just kind of bending it around.
Yeah.
Well. And we do have another question.
Yeah, so Hannah on Facebook asks, do you have a limit for how heavy the necklaces are?
Okay, so Hannah and Tracy are asking if there's a limit to how heavy the necklaces are. Now, I'm assuming you're probably referring to a little bit of the beading wire. Now, like I was saying earlier, if you look on the cover of a lot of this, and this is of course listed in the product descriptions, it'll tell you the breaking point. Now, this one has a 26.9 pound breaking point, and if you're wearing that necklace, gotta help you because you're probably gonna fall over with a 30-pound necklace on. But that's just kind of there to help guide you in terms of stress. Now, we do have a couple of examples where Julie made this really long necklace with gemstones at the bottom. Yep. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, wasn't sure which one you're going for.
That one with gemstones at the bottom. But what she did is she utilized the wood beads at the top to kind of combat that weight on this, and also that tassel is pretty hefty down there at the bottom as well. But that's a little tip for you guys, so you can use some wood beads or some lighter seed beads even if you're using some gemstone beads and you don't want to do all gemstones and all metal, because then it can be really heavy. Now, in terms of choosing the right beading wire for that, you can go a little bit heavier as long as it's going to fit through the hole, but I would recommend going for probably a 19 strand, probably very similar to what you've got here, but you can probably get away with a 0.020. Again, depending on how big the holes of, you know, like a gemstone or even a pearl would be. But you can actually do, you know, some pretty hefty pieces, some good gemstones, and you don't have to make it lighter on yourself if you don't want to. But yeah, I think the indications on here will tell you that. But again, just go with, you know, like it'll tell you the pound that it can handle, like the breaking point. And for many of them, it's like it's over 20 pounds. So you'd really have to yank on it pretty hard to break it. Because don't forget, guys, these are steel cables wrapped in a nylon coating. So they're meant to withstand a lot. Now, we're going to show you some thread protectors here in a little bit, but that will also sort of help protect the wire from getting that wear on it, because sometimes when you do the crimp, it can actually cut the wire, but we're going to show you guys how to not do that, because that's often a common mistake that happens with left stringing. So speaking of clasping and crimping, let's see it happen.
All right, so I finished my bracelet design, and I am ready to crimp my crimp bead and add my clasp. All right, so we've tapered it down to, basically it's a single strand, but it's the two that are together still. So you see those two strands, we're still holding them together. We've separated out our magnetic clasp, so we have half of the clasp here, and it's got that handy little loop. Now, I am not using a thread and wire protector. I sure could have.
You could, but you don't have to.
Yep. And now I'm just gonna take my wire and I'm gonna feed it back through that crimp bead, both strands of it. And let's see if I can do it on the black here. So I'm just holding in place and bringing it down to just a smaller loop. Now, my crimp bead cover is gonna go over this crimp bead, which is gonna add a little bit of width to it. So I wanna keep that in mind. I don't wanna make this loop super tiny. I think that's actually pretty good on this one.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, it might be a little big. There we go. I just don't want it too tight when I add that crimp bead cover. So now we've got essentially 4 strands. We've got 2 exiting and 2 looping around and back. And now I'm gonna use my plier. Where can we see it best? Here you see it's got a bunch of notches on here. So I'm gonna be using this back notch first that looks like a V. And then I'm gonna go up 1 notch and then do the fold over part of the crimp. So this one here is gonna help to make it mimic that shape. It's gonna kind of crimp, well, what's a good word for it? Kind of
Fold?
fold.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna kind of, here we're just gonna put it right in here and we're gonna rest it in that very back notch. And then we're just gonna squeeze. And now let me show you what it looks like now. So it mimicked that V shape. And now we're gonna go ahead and rotate it on its side. And I want it in that notch that's next to it because this is a pretty large crimp bead. It's 2.5, crimp tube, excuse me, 2.5 by 2.5. And we're gonna squeeze. And it basically just folded in on itself.
And you know, we got this question, we actually get this a lot, is how do you combat the magnetic clasp? And unfortunately, you just wiggle your way in there, and then you know, because once you kind of have your crimp plier in place, you can get it. And but just before we move on from the 4-in-1 crimpers, I just want to show you, this is the back of the package. So if you do get this, you'll actually, I feel like this is maybe a little bit easier to see than actually on the tool, which is silly. But so you have your crimping station, and then it goes from 3, 2, and 1, and then it'll tell you that you have a nice chain nose plier at the top there as well. But Julie used the 3mm because she's using a 2.5. So in that case, you always want to go up the size. So
exactly.
All right, moving on.
All right,
Just
so
kidding.
I'm gonna finish this side here and show you, and then we do have another question. So let me just complete this one task here. So what I'm gonna do, normally my preference, if I can, is to thread this through some adjacent beads. I just like doing that. I like having a little security. I can't do it in this instance. So it's really one of those things, I do it when I can, sometimes I can't, because I'm not gonna be able to get 2 more strands through that little pearl. So I'm just gonna trim it up close. Hello, magnetic clasp. All right, now I'm ready for my crimp bead cover. And a crimp bead cover is essentially an open bead. So it's just like a bead that's open. I'm gonna have the opening facing out. I'm gonna hold this and slide it. And it can be a little hard with magnetic clasp. I will fully admit that, because the magnetic clasp wants to grab on to your tool.
But you kind of have a good grip there where you're sort of holding both sides of it.
So I've got it over there, and now I'm just gonna squeeze it together. And what I like to do is I like to go from different angles to try to get a nice seamless look. But there we go. So now it just looks like a little bead right there.
Very nice.
So now let's answer the question.
Yeah.
And then I can do the other side as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so Linda on Facebook asked if there are any tools that are must-haves when you're doing a bead stringing.
Sure. So Linda is asking if there are any must-haves for bead stringing, must-have tools. I'm going to say the Xuron 4, but you must have some type of crimping plier.
There you go.
So let me kind of show these to you guys here. So these are mostly just different sizes, and here, let me kind of clear a little space because I want you guys to be able to see the noses of these. So we have the Mighty Crimper here, and when you see it crimped together, you can actually see that it's got that nice kidney bean shape to it. And so you do exactly what Julie just did. So you do the first part in that little kidney bean, and then you crimp it over with that little section right there. So these are the Mighty Crimpers. So these are gonna be utilized when you're gonna have some big crimp tubes. But then you also have this one here, and hopefully you can see it, but it's much smaller, but it's the same version, where you have that little kidney bean shape, and then you have that nice little circle shape there as well. But the reason I like the Xuron 4-in-1s, and you can kind of see it, there we go, is it has that nice little V, which will kind of serve as your kidney shape, but when you put it together, you can see that there are 3 little distinct notches there. And I'm going to give these back to Julie so she can finish. Thank you. But they work fine, just fine the same. We also do have the magical crimpers, but all in all, you'll need a pair of crimping pliers. You will need a pair of flush cutters like we've been demonstrating here. This is going to help you cut that wire. Do not use scissors. It will ruin your scissors. So you do need flush cutters. And then I would recommend a good pair of chain nose pliers as well. You can use round nose pliers, but those chain nose pliers are really going to kind of help you with those crimp covers and kind of getting anything where it needs to be there. Also, if you find that your crimping pliers, the little end didn't give you quite the result, you can always come in with a chain nose plier and just kind of pinch it together. So chain nose plier, flush cutters, crimping pliers. I'd say at least those 3.
And then optional, if I was to add a 4th, would be the little bead stopper.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a handy little tool. And you get a pack of like 6 or 10, you get a lot of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say they come in packs of 6. These are the larger ones. We do have smaller ones as well, and we don't have them on our table, and I'm sorry about that. But these are the large ones, and usually this is what you're gonna wanna use for stringing. And you can actually use these little guys to separate strands. If you're doing a multiple strand project and you have one that you just want to keep separated, so you can use the little coils as little guidelines there as well. So just a little extra tip about bead stoppers, and these are a godsend. Yeah, I don't know what I would do without my bead stoppers. I used to use tape actually, and then
me
but
too.
you know what? Tape would slide off. Like I used to use Scotch tape when I didn't know any better about bead stoppers. Yeah, but it would slide off. So hey, you made a bracelet.
I made a bracelet.
You made a bracelet.
All right, so I finished the other side, and so this is what we've got. We've got the little magnetic clasp. We've got the crimp bead covers that end up looking like little beads, and then we have our bracelet. And I did leave it where there was enough wiggle room. So if you look here, you can see like I can almost pull apart the beads and see just like a millimeter, half a millimeter of beading wire.
Okay.
Barely that, but it's just enough that the beads aren't pulled so tight.
Right.
So they can still move, but they are kept together with these strand reducers. So they can move, but they're still, there's no big gaps, I guess.
Well, because don't forget, guys, at the end of the day, you're going to wear the jewelry. You know, like it looks nice on the table, and hopefully you'll be selling it, but you need it to be wearable because that's its job, its purpose.
Yeah. So
I love that. I'm glad you did that one in the Tahitian.
I know, I love the
So
Tahitian.
gorgeous.
yeah, so
Yeah, that really does look really nice with the gold.
that's what it would look like on.
I love that.
And if you wanted to make it smaller, just take off a couple beads from each side.
Nice.
So
I like that.
not hard to do. So I wouldn't mess with the center point in a design like this. I would just take it off at the ends.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because you could very easily take off a 4mm pearl from each side, and that, you know, sometimes that's all the, you know, less space you need, or more space you need if you want to add a 4mm to each side.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're running a little over time here, but I'm gonna do something kind of quick here. So it's gonna be a lot of what Julie just showed you, so I'm gonna move a little faster, but if you guys have questions, of course, please shout them out. And just before I get into my project here, which is kind of taking over the table now, before we get into my project here, don't forget, guys, that we still have our giveaway going on, and I'm going to show you really, really fast what that is. So we have this beautiful bead board here, and it's got a nice plastic cover on it because it's meant for travel, so you can kind of see how that looks here. We're giving you guys some beading wire, some beads, some crimp tubes in the 2x2 and lots of different finishes, so you can choose your favorite. And then we have the bead stoppers, and then we wanted to make sure that you guys had one of our favorite tools here, which is these Xuron 4-in-1 crimping pliers. All right, so all you need to do is just leave a little comment here, anywhere in the feed, say where you're tuning in from or what your favorite stringing project is, or I don't care, you can tell me your kids' names. Anything will enter you guys to win the giveaway today. So we're gonna be announcing that winner live in just a little bit. All right.
All right.
All right, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna actually grab my project, and this is what I was talking about, where you can create a project where it's just 3 strands of beads that are all just strung, and you can just see how very simple this pattern is. I just use 8, 6, and 4, so I kind of took a tip from Julie there with my sizing. So 8, 6, and 4, and then there's little true 2s, which are 2mm beads in between there, and that's all it is. It's just a simple pattern of strung. There's no scalloping, there's no nothing. But what I could then do is then take all 3 strands and braid them together and then kind of taper them at the end. So I'm going to show you guys kind of what that looks like really quickly here. So I'm going to use some of these closed jump rings here, and these can actually be utilized as well. So you don't have to bring all the strands together to do one or to try to get 3 strands through a crimp tube, because that just wasn't going to work here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the bead stopper from one of my projects here. And I'm gonna slide on a crimp tube. And then I'm gonna put it up and through one of my closed jump rings and back down through here at the end.
And that's a great tip. A closed jump ring is so simple and readily available. But it makes a great strand reducer, and you can find these ones that are nice and have like a texture to them.
Yeah, these ones have a little rope texture, and I just thought that was really, really pretty. All right, so what I'm doing is, because I can scooch these up later, I'm not too worried about it. I always do that on my first side because I don't want to have any extra wire or anything at the other side. Excuse me. All right, so I have a little loop there, and I'm gonna come in with my Xuron 4-in-1s. Now, there is, in my opinion, a right way to do this, and Julie did it the right way, so it's good. It's where you have that little point facing down, so you're crimping down, and it's just kind of a little gravity thing, but also it allows you to kind of set it in your little notch there, make sure it is nice and centered, and you can kind of give a little look to both sides before you do your little crimp. So I crimped my little V, and then I just do my 90-degree rotation, and bring it together. And that's it. All right, so I have one done. So this one I can actually string through the next adjacent bead before I trim it off.
Sorry.
Sorry, we're sharing tools today. All right, so just coming in and just trimming that off. All right. Perfect. Okay, so now this is again why I leave a little bit of slack there. Before I scooch everything up, I want to add a little crimp cover. Now, a rule of thumb in terms of sizing is you want to go at least 1 millimeter larger generally to cover your crimp tube. So if you're using a 2x2, I recommend at least a 3, because the idea is to cover the crimp tube, not to just sort of let it sit on top of it. So just, you know, but you can go bigger. Julie did bigger, and that's a good little tip there as well. All right.
So really look at what your design is, and maybe you want a bigger element there, or maybe you want a smaller one.
Exactly.
Now you're also using, at least from here, it looks like those have some texture to them too.
Yeah, so I like the texture, especially when you have to consider that the beads are fairly simple. You know, these are just check fire polish beads here, and they're actually all separate strands. There we go. Get my wire out of the way. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the other side of my beading wire, and I'm just going to slide my bead stopper down, because I wanted to have just a little extra slack when I get to the other side. All right, so now I'm just gonna repeat that with the other 2 strands.
And as you're repeating that exact same technique, I just wanna show just some of the variety of these little crimp bead covers. So you see there's ones that are kind of sparkly, and there's plain ones, there's different finishes, there's larger, smaller. So you really can match it to whatever your design is. If you have a fancier design, you can pick a fancier one. If you have a more simplistic one, you can pick a more simplistic one. So there's a lot of choices when it comes to the crimp bead covers. Now, that said, if you have a piece of jewelry that's, say, slim like this, you can just leave the crimp bead uncovered.
Yeah.
So I've done that before too. So I just had these little seed beads and noodle beads, and I did not want something large there. I did go ahead and use the thread and wire protector, but I chose to use my just leave my crimp bead uncovered. So it is a preference, it's a design choice. The crimp bead covers are decorative, and they do add a nice decorative touch, but you don't have to use them. But if you do choose to, you have a lot of choices, and you can match it to your design.
No, yeah, and that's a great thing to keep in mind, guys. Everything that we're doing here, it's dealer's choice. You know, you don't have to do any of these extra steps that we're kind of showing you. It's just sort of, if you want to do something a little bit different, or I don't know, maybe you got bored with stringing and you want to take it to the next level, it's entirely up to you. But I think that's what I love about stringing, is that there's really no wrong way to do it, but there are definitely some helpful tips, and that's why we're here today.
Exactly.
So, all right. So
and again, do check out the projects at beadaholique.com, where you can find everything you see here. You can find all the supplies for sale. And that's really going to share more tips, because in the videos, in the project descriptions, we do try to impart any tips or needed little information. So if you are patterning your design after something we've done before, you might learn something there that will help you along.
Absolutely. And one other thing I want to say about crimp covers is that, you know, because they do look like little beads, you can actually add a couple of them if you end up having a gap. Which is something that I've had to do before. So you can add an extra crimp cover to kind of fill up that little space in the back if you ever need to do that. All right, so I'm just doing the basic same technique, but you can see that I've added all 3 strands there to my closed jump ring. And this is just gonna kind of work as my little strand reducer. So you can do that. You don't have to, but you can also do that. But I just wanted them all to come together to one point. All right, I don't think that's gonna fit through that 4mm. Nope. Nice try. All right, so coming in with that. All right, so the last thing that I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna adjust my bead stoppers. There we go. All right, so now I'm gonna take my loop here, and I'm gonna set this out in front of, I know, I picked the longest project to do on this table. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create a really traditional 3-strand braid. So I'm just taking all 3 strands and I'm just gonna kind of braid them together. Now, you can do a loose braid, you can do a tight braid, but again, this is just, this is also an example of, you know, you do wanna start with the clasp at one side. But just really simple, I'm just braiding those 3 strands together, and it's creating a nice sort of sparkly aspect to it. And we have another question.
This one, Irina was asking, could wire protectors be used instead of closed jump rings?
Okay, so the
Yes.
question is, from Irina, sorry, we had to think about the question. That was a really good question.
That was a good question.
So sorry guys, because I know you guys couldn't hear the question, it just, we had to think. Her question was, can wire protectors be used as closed jump rings?
Yes, they can. Sorry, I had to think about how you'd still probably, in this example here, you'd still probably need some sort of jump ring to bring them back together, but you could always use an open jump ring for that. But yeah, you can absolutely use closed jump rings, because what it in essence does is it creates a loop, and actually you can do that, and I'll show you an example here in a second. Because otherwise you do need to use a crimp around a closed jump ring. Oh, that actually ended up being fairly even. All right, so there is
pretty.
that. There you go. So I just want to answer this question really, really fast. All right, so you can see here that what happened here was I used a wire protector to end. So there's a crimp tube and then a wire protector. So that's utilizing that closed jump ring, but I still needed to use an open jump ring to attach that clasp. In this example here, I'm trying to think if I have an example where I did not do that. Oh, I do. Ha, I knew I would. Ha ha ha. All right. So here's an example where I used that thread protector or wire protector to actually act as that closed jump ring on that lobster clasp. Now on this side, I still wanted to add an open jump ring so that my lobster could have something to attach to, but this is an example where it does sort of serve as that closed jump ring. So yes, is the answer to that very simple question and my very long-winded answer. Sorry and thank you. All right. So now, I still have my little closed jump ring up here, but what happened here was I actually did a better job than I'd actually hoped to. I kind of hoped to screw this up. Sorry guys. But I did the nice little braid here, and this is, it's pretty stiff, but I want to just kind of adjust it just to make sure that it's nice and even. My braid's pretty stiff. But you can see that not all the ends are totally even. So what I'm actually gonna do is, now that I have my braid, I'm just gonna take off a couple of these beads here and just set them aside. Now you can take off or you can add on, but then in essence, this side is just gonna look exactly like this, and then you can come on and you can add on a little lobster clasp. And then onto the other side, what I did is I took some smaller jump rings with those larger jump rings and I created a little chain. I'm not gonna do it here, it's the same thing. And I did write this full tutorial up, so if you guys are curious about seeing how this bracelet is finished, it is the Mermaid Lagoon necklace. I just said bracelet, didn't I? Bracelet necklace.
It's okay, yesterday I
You
said
can
like
make this a
10
bracelet.
a.m., 10 p.m.
Oh yeah, that was funny. I was like, no, it's 10 a.m. guys. Thinking that people might show up at 10 p.m. for our class tonight that we won't be here for. But anyway, so that's another little example. But again, you can just see how simple it is, these 3 strung pieces coming together in that braided fashion just to create something kind of new.
So pretty. I love that look.
Cute. Yeah, and it's, you know what, it's just check fire polish beads and the graduated sizes, and that's one thing that I'm always looking for, is how can I use the same bead in different sizes to create something brand new. All right, so before we kind of move on here, I just want to kind of move some things from my table because I'm sure you guys are curious to see how these wire protectors work. All right, so let me see if I've picked the right size here. Okay, so the wire protectors, when you look at these, they are sized by which wire will fit in them. So you'll see it and it'll be sized by like, you know, 0.018, 0.01, or 0.02. Yeah. Sorry, sizes. But how these work is there's little shoe horns that just look like that, and they have these little holes at the bottom. So very simply, you just take the wire and thread it up through one side, and then you thread it up and over so that it comes down through the other side. And then you can just slide it up there, just like your little loop, and you can see that it sits right in there. And that will just sort of protect that wire from getting kinked. And then you add your little crimp tube there to the end just to secure it. So that's one way to use these. And again, yes, you can absolutely use them as closed jump rings, but these are just a really nice little sort of finishing technique.
And I do want to show you, because you recommended it when I was feeling challenged on this piece. I could not get my toggle clasp to move freely, but how I was stringing it.
Yeah.
And you said, well, add a little thread and wire protector because it's going to give you that gap and it's going to let your toggle move. And so I thought that was a really great tip that you had.
Thank you.
So yeah, that was good because I was having to recreate this over and over again because it was not moving for me.
Well, and it looks like you do have 2 crimp covers there at the end.
I do. I have 2 crimp
to
covers.
help extend that as well.
Yep, because if I had beaded all the way up here to my toggle, I could not get it into the toggle round piece of the clasp. But because I have these and they're smaller than my wood beads, I was able to go ahead and use it like that. And all I did was close that. There's not another crimp bead hidden under there. It's just a closed crimp bead cover.
Yeah, which is in essence just a metal seed bead.
It's just a metal seed bead, absolutely. So another good application for those crimp bead covers, or not crimp bead covers. Well, the crimp bead covers and the
and the wire protector. Yeah, you can use both.
Exactly.
So another little thing that you guys might be unfamiliar with are actually these. They're really cool. They're little bead spacers, but they're called bead bumpers. And the reason they do that is because they are little silicone spacers and they are so itty bitty. I pulled out a couple here and we actually have some that are cubes, but I have a little strand here and I just want to show this to you, and I'm going to try to lean over so the camera doesn't need to move. But what happens is they're just these little spacers in here, and I have them on a little wire here just to show you guys. But when you get up really close, you can just see that they kind of squish together. So if you wanted to do something that sort of has the appearance of pearl knotting, you can actually use the little bead bumpers so you don't have to worry about knotting, and then you can still just create a strung bracelet. So just something else to consider. And these are also great to use if you are using pearls or gemstones and you just need that little extra cushion there.
Yeah.
So we have these in lots of different sizes and of course colors. You know, there's clear, there's white, there's black, there's gold. So lots happening there.
All right, we're working our way through the table.
We're working our way through it. Lots to show you guys.
And if we've missed anything, you guys definitely let us know. And Brian's watching those comments and those questions. He's doing a great job for us. So I know sometimes in these classes we get to talking and creating, and then we forget to show something. And then after the fact, we go back and we answer questions on it. But definitely feel free if there's something on our table that we haven't covered. Like I know we haven't covered the magical crimper.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and take a look at what that is, because it is another form of a crimping plier. So I'm going to move this.
Okay.
Actually reach.
All right, so the magical crimpers, this is actually really fun. So I have an example here, and Julie, why don't you actually grab that?
Okay,
it's a little bit better, yeah.
Okay, so if you look up really close, here is the crimp bead right there, but it looks just like a round bead. There is no seam, which is interesting because let me see if this example shows the seam. So this example, okay, so here you go. You see that little seam line? Might be a little hard to see, but because we didn't cover.
I have one here.
Do you have one there that you can see?
So you can kind of see.
Oh, that's good because it's thicker.
So this is an uncovered crimp bead, and you can see on the other side it has that nice little rounded, but on this side it has that seam. Well, with the magical crimper, you don't have to worry about that. And in the example I did here, I actually used tiny little round gold beads. So by using the magical crimper, I could just continue that design so it doesn't look like there's a crimp there at the bottom. So it is using these tubes, but the magical crimper turns a tube into a bead.
Yeah, a round bead.
But it is still a crimp bead, so it still actually crimps the wire. Yep. So it's just a round crimp bead.
Yeah, and we have a full tutorial video on that
Yes.
at beadaholique.com and on our YouTube channel. So if you're tuning in on Facebook, we do have a full YouTube channel with a ton of videos, and one of them is that magical crimping plier.
Yeah. So we'll show you how to use that, and you'll get a nice up close look at kind of how that really forms that little ball there.
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right. Should we look at our giveaway
Let's look at our giveaway one more time as we are getting ready to choose a winner here. So you saw them in action, so we are giving you guys the Xuron 4-in-1 crimpers. We're giving you some beading wire to get started, some lovely beads. This is a great bead mix in a nice green and blue. We're giving you some crimp tubes, and again, these are the 2x2s. That's kind of what I feel is a good standard size.
Me too.
In some different colors there. We're giving you guys some bead stoppers. And then I just want to clear the items off of here so that I can show you guys this lovely Travelers on the go beading board. So it has a nice plastic piece on the top, and I don't want to take it out because I want it to come to you just like this. But it's got this nice plastic on the top, and it helps you sort of design your strung jewelry. And it's got all these nice little compartments and components for your beads.
Yeah, so a very handy tool, and it keeps your beads from rolling all over the place.
Always good.
Which I think I ended up with a few beads.
I know, I was going to say, I was like, there's probably a few beads on the floor today.
All right, so let's give people one more minute.
Yeah, one more minute. Ask
Enter,
any more questions.
Ask any questions, and then we will pick a winner.
Yeah, and so if you guys are just tuning in now, the whole class will be available later today, so you guys can always check back for that. And we do these classes the first Friday of every month. It's so fun. We always have a new technique or a new, it's a new season. Maybe last year we did some great Christmas jewelry, we did Halloween jewelry, so just lots of different little things. So if you guys have an idea for something that you'd like to see that we haven't done yet, leave it in the comments because we will take that into consideration.
Absolutely. We're always looking for ideas.
Yeah, well, we're always trying to find new techniques, and maybe there's something that we haven't heard of that you want to learn about. We'll learn and we'll teach you. We'll do our best.
Which is one of the best parts of our job.
Yes.
We do enjoy that.
The experimenting with
the
everything.
experimenting.
In our mad bead lab.
All right, so I think Brian has gone ahead and selected a winner, and the winner is always random, just so you guys know.
Yeah.
So,
all right, so congratulations to Becky Justice. You are our winner of this wonderful giveaway, so thank you so much for tuning in. So all you need to do, Becky, is just email service@beadaholique.com, and we will get your information so we can ship this out to you. So congratulations to Becky Justice.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. It's now October, so enjoy the fall season. So thanks for joining us, and please do come back and see us again. And so we'll be back on Tuesday with a beading break.
Yep, and be sure to get all of these supplies and tools by heading over to beadaholique.com. You'll see all the tutorials and everything that we talked about here today. All right, thanks so much for joining us, guys, and we'll be back very soon.
All right,
Bye.